Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. Before we get started, please share the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast with a friend or peer or a colleague. We always appreciate you guys spreading the show. It's how we grow. Today's episode is very special. I'm so excited to have on the line someone I've worked with quite extensively. He's a happiness expert. He's a life coach and an author and a speaker. He's got a PhD in counseling psychology. He's a lot of things. Joel Wade is on the line, happiness expert, Dr. Joel Wade. How are you doing today, my friend?
Good, Jordan. How are you?
I am doing excellent. This is the perfect show to do together, man. I love working with you. I love talking with you. And today's subject, which is mental health, emotional health, depression, all of this, happiness, this is really where you shine, and you really have some interesting knowledge and really, really practical and powerful principles when it comes to this stuff, man. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's always fun doing this kind of thing with you.
For those of you who haven't heard us before, we actually do a show together when we can. We both have very busy lives, but we do post a couple of episodes of the Mastering Happiness podcast each and every month. And you guys can find that everywhere on Spotify and apps everywhere. And also check out Dr. Joel's book, The Virtue of Happiness. Where can people find that, Joel?
Well, you can find it's on Amazon. You can go to my website, drjoelwade.com. But it's easy on Amazon.
So check that out, everybody. I've been waiting to get you on the show for a while, man. So this is exciting for me. Let's discuss, really what your whole work is surrounding, which is, I know you're deep into what some people would consider personal development, right? I mean, to back it up a little bit, you studied under Nathaniel Branden, and anyone who recognizes that name, he was kind of known as the father of self-esteem. He did so much work in self-esteem. And the work that you do and that he did doesn't necessarily resemble the type of self-esteem work we're doing now or what normal people would think of the self-esteem movement. But the point is, you've been in this stuff for a long time, man. So I'm excited to explore this.
Now.
40 years. That's so crazy. That is so wild, man. And I feel like this is the work that we're missing in today's modern society. I feel like this inner work, working on our character, working on our self-esteem, working on our relationships, this is the kind of stuff that we need now more than ever, I feel. Do you feel that as well?
Yeah, and the thing about with happiness is a lot of people misunderstand what, at least what I mean by happiness, because there's the kind of happiness that you can get from just everything going right, everything going the way you want it, getting what you want, having a happy moment, or even, you can get a momentary pleasure from things like addictions and things that are awful for you.
Right.
So what I talk about is more what Aristotle meant when he used the word eudaimonia, which is sort of success in life. It's more about being happy about your life. Mm-hmm. And within that, we all have really wonderful things that happen and really awful things that happen. Life is hard sometimes, and sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it hurts a lot. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things we don't have control of with that. But that doesn't mean life is miserable and we just suffer and we die. That's part of life. And so what we have control over is how do we deal with that? How do we deal with the vicissitudes of life, the ebbs and flows, the good times and the bad times? And what we have control over is what we do, how we approach those challenges and hardships and opportunities and wonderful, blissful moments and expansive times in our life.
We can't control the situations a lot of the time, but we can control our reactions to them.
Yeah, and we can find the parts of the situations that we can take action about and do those as best as we possibly can. If you're looking for just being happy or having like a Facebook moment for every moment of your life, you're going to be miserable because life doesn't work that way. That's not reality. So it's a matter of, if you know that there are going to be challenges and hard times in life, if you know that that's natural, then how you approach it, you have a lot of say in how you approach it, how you deal with your own thinking and emotions, mastering your own psychology and your own self.
Yes.
And being good with the people and the situations you're actually engaged in. So there's a lot we can do around that makes all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I love that idea of pursuing eudaimonia. And I've heard that translated a bunch of different ways: success at life, the good life. I've heard that a lot, but that's more the deep satisfaction, the deep character cultivation, as opposed to, like you said, the fleeting pleasure and things like that. So yeah, I love it, man.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of this work. And it really ties in with today's topic, which is the other side of that coin, which is, I mean, let's be honest, the mental health crisis that we face in today's free, advanced, high-tech society. It's very contrasting to the way, if you look at our society through my prism, which is, now's the best time to be alive. If you know history, things are going very, very well. In fact, check out the history of happiness on the Mastering Happiness podcast, and you'll understand just how far we've come. Yet here we are facing this crisis about anxiety, about depression, all of these internal struggles. I know you're inundated in this stuff, Joel, but do you really see this as a crisis, and do the numbers and statistics support that idea?
Well, I think the word crisis is used much too easily. I think there's something about a crisis, the word crisis or disaster or something, that when it's actually a crisis or a disaster, it focuses our attention in sort of a tunnel vision to deal with that crisis. And by definition, almost, we don't pay attention to everything else that's happening.
Interesting.
So I wouldn't say that we have a mental health crisis right now, but if you look at all the different elements of life, from life expectancy to health, to even pollution in the Western world, or ability to travel, the wealth, all the different elements of life, the only thing that's really gone down everything has improved. Everything's better, and almost miraculously better. And people don't like to hear that, and they don't believe it, because we watch the news, we hear all these stories about how everything's going to hell in a handbasket. It's not really true. But we are more depressed, and significantly more depressed than our in previous generations. And part of that, frankly, is the effect of the media constantly drumming in that we're in a crisis. Because it sells. It's their marketing strategy.
Right.
If you run a TV news show and you want people to tune in, the best thing to do is to tell them all the awful stuff that's happening in the world, which almost by definition we're helpless to do anything in reality about, unless you're at the place. I mean, if there's a disaster happening in another country, I don't have any impact on that. So all I can do is feel bad and tune in next time to see if it's gotten better.
Right.
So it puts me in a state of helplessness and anxiety, and those are, if you want to create depression, that's what you want to build.
It's really a shame too, because like you said, the whole point of running an organization like a news outlet is to get clicks, to get views, to get those things. And that's really what we've steered towards. I don't know if we all know the ramifications that those types of things have on our brain on a subconscious level, on a neurologically programmed level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it has a significant effect, because that was one of the things that Martin Seligman found in his research on learned helplessness, and then later on learned optimism, is how central a sense of helplessness can be to depression.
Right.
Because it frees us. There's no sense of action you can take, and it's an awful place to be.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I hate to interject, but I just want to say I think a lot of people think of depression as just being sad. But this syndrome that we're all getting that manifests itself in a couple of different ways. First of all, that's not what depression really is. You know what I mean? Can you kind of speak on that more in a broader sense?
Yeah, sadness is an emotion that we feel when we lose something or when something affects us in a way that's painful, or it's an emotion, and emotions. Part of the word emotion is motion. So if we get angry and we say something, or we take action to stop the whatever the trespass is that's gotten us angry, we don't feel angry anymore. And if we're effective, we just feel good.
Right.
Okay, on to the next thing. If I've lost something and I feel sad, and I feel the sadness, it tends to come in waves. And if I allow the wave and then move on to the next thing, I've felt sadness and I'm on to the next thing. So there's a movement to healthy emotions. Depression is more like a stagnant pond.
Right.
You have a situation where you aren't able to mobilize yourself, and so it's not really an emotion. It's a stagnation of motion.
Whoa, that's a really good way to put it, and that's exactly right. Doctors will ask you things like, "Do you sleep all day?" and "Are you still tired?" Like that's not an emotional question, but that's a huge indicator. Do you still enjoy the things that you used to enjoy? I just feel that we have to treat it like it is, which is something much deeper than just being bummed.
Yeah, and being bummed, being sad can certainly be part of it, but it's not the essential quality that makes depression.
Right. Yeah, and you mentioned, there's definitely a lot of negative inundation when it comes from all sorts of different outlets in our lives, just inputs in our lives, whether it's, our teachers telling us we're not doing good, or like you said, the media, all of these things. What do you feel are the biggest contributors to all of this?
Well, okay, so part of it is let me just say a little more about the media. So if you watch the news, you're not watching a statistically objective presentation of what's happening in the world. You're watching the worst things that's happening everywhere in the world, piped in through very powerful imagery and vocal tones and storytelling in a way that it feels like, if you're watching on TV, it feels like it's happening right here on your street.
Jeez, man.
Like this is happening now to you, when really it's not happening now to you. It's happening somewhere in the world, and it's awful that it's happening. I'm not trying to minimize any awful that happens, but it makes it feel like it's more pervasive than ever, when actually statistically it's less pervasive. There's less violence in the world. There's more rationality in the world. There's more problem solving in the world. We're much more effective as a species now than we've ever been. And if you ever, if you think about a time in history when for anybody of any background to be alive, now would be it.
Right.
And there are some hellholes in the world that nobody wants to be in, that's as awful as it's ever been. But
true.
In general, what you're seeing in the media is not an accurate picture of the world.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm worried that it's kind of shaping reality as we shape our own internal realities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. And there's a lot of reward for people to blow things up into, like, we have to take care of our environment. Obviously, that's an important thing, and there are things that are being studied and what we need to do about it. But when that's blown up into, we're all going to die in 10 years, well, then there's nothing you can do about that.
Right. That
there's
is
no
a
action
very,
to take.
yeah. I just, like I said before, yeah, I think there's repercussions to that sort of talk.
Absolutely. It puts us in a helpless stance toward what should be problem solving.
Yes, I like that. That is a very good way to put it.
So that's one element of it. Another element is social media, where we're seeing, in contrast, we're seeing people having the best lives ever, everywhere. They're doing all the best things, and even if you had a really wonderful, flourishing life, if you took those images seriously, we get in trouble when we compare ourselves with other people. And social media is able to amplify that in a way that is depressing.
Right.
Because nobody has fantastic days every moment of every day.
So when people are seeing representations of that, they kick themselves. What am I doing with my life? Look at this guy. Is it just a constant false reminder of how your life isn't exciting enough or flashy enough or wealthy enough or whatever it is? Yeah.
One of the things that happened after the Berlin Wall fell is, I think it was the Brookings Institute did a study. I'm doing that's by memory, so I'm not sure if that's where it was from, on people in the countries of Eastern Europe, and their happiness actually went down because they had been seeing images of what the West was like, and then the communism fell. They should have that now, and it takes time.
Wow.
And so they were comparing themselves just statistically with the countries in the West, and they felt worse about themselves. That comparing ourselves to other people can be a real poisonous thing, and that's exactly what social media can amplify.
And that's what I worry about when it comes to social media specifically. Is there all of the things that they're promoting? Not all of them, but most of the things that they are showing off really aren't the true, ways to happiness. It's not about having an exciting and rich life as much as it is, correct me if I'm wrong, what you encourage people to pursue, time with family, working on long-term projects that build real satisfaction, time in nature, honing your body, staying healthy, cultivating your friendships and relationships. Those are the things that lead to real happiness, but they don't really make a great Instagram post. Most of them don't.
No, because it takes time and it's hard work. There are days that aren't very, very dramatic or exciting.
Yes,
because you're just working.
Right. But yeah, I mean, that's really the big lie I feel in social media, is that somehow these happenings or this amount of money or these types of objects are going to make you happy. That really isn't the case if you look at the deepest thinkers and the experts such as yourself, and all the long line of people you've come from, all the way back to the ancient Greeks talking about eudaimonia. Who you're going to listen to,
Yeah. There are a handful of things that bring us really, truly deep satisfaction. Being a good mate to your husband or wife, being a good parent, having something that you're good at, that you can do,
contributing to others,
being helpful in the community, being a part of the community.
Exactly.
So you have a sense of belonging, but also a sense that it matters that you're there. Earned success. These things are the things that over time build us a life that we feel really good about.
Yes.
And then we have a sense of pleasure as a baseline. We have a sense of sort of joy and satisfaction as a baseline. And then when something happens, we lose a loved one, or the business goes south or something, we have that base. That's where we're standing. We're standing on that baseline, and not on the what happens to happen in the world, whether things go well for us today or not.
Other people's baselines.
Standing on
honest.
the baseline. Yeah.
That's a good way to
We're
put it.
We're standing on that earned success, that baseline that we've built about what kind of life we live.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And let me posit this thought. This is something that I've really wanted to talk about on the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast, and I want to get your reaction to it. I feel like we humans often partition different parts of our health. We have our physical health, and we have our mental health, and we have our emotional health, and they're all equally important but separate. I'm starting to think that there's no partitions at all. I'm starting to think that feeling good about yourself after doing something nice for someone is health. That is that is physical health. And having listened to your work so much and seeing there's real studies on this sort of thing, optimists living longer and all of this sort of thing, don't you feel that all of this just lives on a continuum, and feeding your body and treating your body right is emotional and mental health, and in the same way that helping someone else is true physical vitality?
Absolutely. Yeah. We separate them out so we can study them and talk about them, but they're all interconnected. If a big part of our physical health, the main factor, or one of the main factors that leads to problems with our physical health, is inflammation.
Yeah, for sure.
Whether it's in your joints with arthritis, or in your heart. It's a big part of heart problems, and so in terms of our health, inflammation, having that overdoing of our body's natural response to a wound, it has a huge impact, and how we feel about ourselves in the world has a huge impact on inflammation.
Oh, 100%. And I like how you use the word wound, because I wonder if an emotional wound, in fact, I know an emotional wound can cause that same reaction.
Yep, absolutely.
So fascinating, man.
And that doesn't mean, well, let me avoid any emotional wounds in my life, because that's not going to happen.
True.
We all have some trauma. We all have some loss and pain. That's just real life. But whether we stay orbiting around it, and so we keep sort of digging at that wound, rather than maybe, if there's something to learn from it, or accepting the emotions that come through.
Right, moving through it.
Moving to toward a more expansive place eventually as we can. Those are the things we can do about it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Talk about some of these things, we talked about what we can do to pursue a happy and healthy life. Is that the key to combating this crisis? Do you have more things that we can do to help kind of inoculate ourselves, to try to improve our mental health? I know people are looking to do things before they turn to something like medication, and you have some really interesting findings and tools in this area. Can you share it with us? Yeah.
Well, first of all, the best intervention for depression is physical exercise.
I believe that 100%.
It's a huge factor, and that doesn't mean if you're depressed and you go exercise, you're going to be all better. It's more if it's part of your habit in life to be physical, to have some movement. I think that's a big reason why we have more depression nowadays, is we're more sedentary.
That's very true. Do we know why that is? I know there's things with like endorphins and the cardiovascular benefits, but do you have any other insights as to why exercise is so beneficial to our mood?
Well, I suspect part of it is that when you do something physical, you have a tangible sense of taking effective action.
Wow.
Even if you're doing,
push-ups,
But if you go for a walk, a walk, you have a sense of motion in your body. And you also, actually, when you're walking, you also have a sense of rhythm in your body. And a physical rhythm in your body of some kind, that's actually a big part of what we experience as joy.
That is so fascinating. I never heard of that. Like dancing.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, if I'm working with somebody as a client, one of the things I might have them do if they're a bit stagnant in where they are in one way or another, maybe they feel depressed or they feel stuck in some way, I might have them just swing their arms, holding something with some weight in it.
Whoa.
And just back and forth. And at first, often, it can be kind of like they're making the movement happen. But then once you allow the flow of it, to just sort of the weight of your arms to naturally swing back and forth in rhythm, that can open up a sense of movement and joy that counters that feeling of being stuck.
So fascinating. And that's almost like an ancient wisdom, like yoga practices,
Mm-hmm.
the way they want you to move things through you. I think a lot of people would look at that as like a little bit out there, maybe, but it's really finding its way into real medical practices,
Yeah. Well, and it sounds out there because it's just not talked about. But if you think our grandparents weren't as likely to be depressed because their daily life was, they'd have to, be doing something physical just to take care of the house or the yard or the crops. Or
staying physical, staying busy.
Whatever it was, there was just a lot more physicality to day-to-day life.
Joel, do you worry about society becoming a little too comfortable? I don't know if I've shared this theory in a while on this show, but I'm going to share it. And I know I've shared it with you before, Joel, but people may have heard of the silk slippers theory. It's a historical theory that takes a look at civilizations. And the idea is wooden shoes up, silk slippers down. And what that means is hard scrabble people, the people who wear wooden shoes in the metaphor, build a society. They're born out of toughness. They're born out of adversity. And that allows them to have the strength and the character to craft a society. We're talking about the people who forged this nation. We're talking about the greatest generation. And they work very, very hard to make life comfortable for the next generation. Well, eventually they reach a tipping point to where the people in the society trade in their wooden shoes for silk slippers. Things get comfortable. Your problems are taken care of, are taken care before you have to address them a lot of the times. A lot of problems disappear. And a lot of people say, this is kind of an older historian methodology or theory, but a lot of people say that's where society starts to decline. They start walking down. Society starts to descend in those silk slippers because of their comfort. There are actually lots of good historical examples of this, like, for instance, the Mongol Empire. There's tons of examples of this. Is this something you worry about, or do you feel that it's really just more of an evolution process in a different direction?
Well, I guess I don't worry about it so much. I see worry as a response to something we're helpless to do anything about.
I love how specific you are with words.
We can affect.
That's a good point. You don't want to worry about something like this. Does it concern you? Does it show up on your radar?
Well, yes. So that said, yes, it absolutely does. And I can, everybody listening, if you just check in for a moment and think about if you reflect on what you're most proud of in your life, it's probably not the time when you lay on the couch all day on a weekend and watch
and
TV.
Knock out every season of Arrested Development in one go.
Yeah. You probably, that time you binge watch, some cop show or something, that's not going to
make the list.
You're not even going to remember that.
It's not on the podium. You're right.
You're going to think about, okay, I was faced with this challenge and it was scary, and I didn't know if I could do it, but I did it. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. I gathered something inside of me and got through that. I mean, I know personally just about everything that I'm most proud of at one point or another scared the hell out of me.
Right. That's a really good point.
And then and so those are the things that build your sense of strength. There's an emotional strength that we can get. A lot of people talk about gratitude, and I do too, because it's a real antidote for a lot of negativity. But gratitude is you're grateful for things that have come to you, good people, good events, good opportunities, things that the world has brought to you. But what we're talking about here is what you've earned and what you're proud of. That's a different kind of strength. It's almost like being grateful to your younger self.
Right.
And you can't do that when everything's just given, when everything's easy. You have to, and we create challenges. We don't have the same challenges that our ancestors did. We don't have to worry about if I don't find some edible roots somewhere today, I'm going to starve. If I don't catch fish, I'm going to starve. I can just go down to the store and get something. But if I'm on the edge financially, I can certainly feel that way.
That's a good point.
And then if I can do something about that, then I can feel good and proud about that. So I think you're absolutely, and then if you extend that to cultures and civilizations, I think that can have a cumulative effect where if everybody just sort of takes everything for granted, I think that is part of what we're seeing today with the rise in depression.
Yeah, it definitely could be. I mean, you just have so much time on your hands. If that's kind of where this stemmed from, is when you said, people used to be busy. Man, if you have all this time to sit around and think about stuff, you better be thinking about positive stuff. To simplify it to a word like positive, but at least not filling your head with things that are going to have, detriment. Here's how I see it too. And I see two major contributors. And as I said before, I do believe they exist on a continuum. One is kind of what you're talking about now, which is the way you think and controlling, mastering your own psychology and all of that. And the other one is having a body that allows you to engage in that sort of thing. Really interestingly, we're going to have a repeat guest come back, Dr. Marvin Singh. He's a microbiome specialist, and it's incredible the effect the microbiome has on your emotions and your ability to reason and your ability to remain calm. It's just incredible to me, and it ties to brain inflammation as well, right?
This is our gut bacteria you're talking about, right?
100%, yes. The massive
absolutely.
ecosystem in your gut. And of course, Western diet. Take a guess. Is it good or bad for the flora in your gut? It's horrible. All of the oils and sugars and all that's so horrible. So he said, if you can get your microbiome on point, you'll experience a whole new reality through your lens of emotion. So I think it's knowing the exercises, knowing the knowledge, the mastery of the psychology, but then also keeping your body healthy so you can allow yourself to think that way. If I'm hungry or hangry, you're not going to be able to reason with me. You know what I'm saying? There's so much that's come out in the last decade or so about how our diet affects our mental health and emotional health too. If you eat 7 helpings of vegetables a day, you're much less likely to be depressed. Whoa.
If you don't.
That's fascinating. I know you've looked into things like the Mediterranean diet a lot. Can you just talk about what you recommend people who you work with, in the field of diet?
Yeah, well, there's so many different diets out there, and we can get caught up in doing it precisely and making sure we don't have just, we can get too perfectionistic about it. And the danger of diets is that it's an external
influencer, motivation.
An external influencer.
Yeah.
So what I like to do, and there's lots of good ways of coming at this, I like to think of it more generally like eat more veggies. Just have that be your main part. You don't have to be a vegetarian, but if you just increase the amount of vegetables you eat in a day, you're going to be healthier. If you decrease the sugar and the bad fats, you're going to be healthier.
Right.
So I like to start. Sometimes people start working with me and they want to start exercising. Maybe they haven't exercised at all, and they say, "Well, how much should I exercise every day?" My question is, how much will you exercise every day?
Right.
Because if we set up a program where you're exercising 2 hours a day, but you're really only going to exercise 10 minutes, well, let's start there because that's the reality. So some of these diets are excellent, and I've seen good results, but it can also be, if you don't do it just right, you can get into that place where, oh, I messed up today. I guess I blew it. And then you're back to eating, cupcakes and
Totally.
sodas.
Completely off the rails. Yeah, I love your psychological approach to everything like that, because I know you talk about the Harvard meta studies that have said the best diet for you is the one you can stick to and all of this stuff. But
Yeah.
I was laughing earlier because you were totally echoing the sentiment of a lot of the guests on the show, specifically functional medicine specialist Dr. Greg Schulte. He's just said, I've never met anyone who ate too many vegetables. That's what he said.
Yeah.
That was an interesting thought, right?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, that's the key to me is if you're eating a whole lot of vegetables, first of all, you're not going to have as much room
for cookies and low quality meat. Yeah.
But also you get used to that. If you're craving cupcakes and donuts and sodas, it's because you've practiced eating cupcakes and donuts and sodas.
Yes.
If you practice eating a lot of vegetables, you're going to start craving vegetables.
You're going to get better at it.
It'll take a little while, so you have to
That's
hang
a
in
good
there.
point. Practice it. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. And part of that, frankly, is that your microbiome's populations change. So
drastically.
you have a new population that's craving the vegetables, and then you have your whole system is working together with you.
Yeah, you're totally right about that. And it actually, transitions nicely into what I want to wrap the show about. This is a coffee show after all. Dr. Joel, are you very familiar with, a lot of the research surrounding the health benefits of coffee, and especially how it's on the rise now that there's more organic coffees out there that don't, treat the crops with pesticides and synthetic fertilizers? Yeah. Do you keep up on this much, or is this news to you?
I don't know a lot of the details of it beyond knowing that if it were introduced today, it would probably be considered a miracle drug. That it does, like I know you've talked about it, it does tend to decrease depression, and there's just a lot of very positive things about it. You can overdo it like anything, but it's in general, a very positive substance. I have a cup right here.
Nice. That's good to hear that you're up on it. We just went to the A4M conference, the longevity conference, and it was pretty split, 33% in each camp. Either I still think coffee is bad, or I don't know, or the camp of I do know the health benefits of coffee. So it's a pretty even split. But listen, there's some things that we know that coffee does help drastically. If you take a look at cirrhosis of the liver, you take a look at Alzheimer's and things like that. And then there are ones that are a little more ancillary, a little less studied. And depression and suicide risk are on that list. And I definitely think it has to do with some of the things, like I said, that we do know coffee does. For instance, the neuroprotectant qualities, the anti-inflammatory qualities, and the positive effects on the microbiome. So here are three things that we know affect mood. Why wouldn't that also, affect depression? Does it make sense to you? Do you think it's more of a physiological thing there, or are you going to take the psychological route? And let me explain myself. Everyone has a respite or respite. Everyone has a little sanctuary. And for some people, that's coffee. And coffee is probably a very, very good choice over something more harmful like alcohol or sugar or hard drugs or anything like that. So if that is your respite, maybe they're just healthier in general and still have that meditative, ritualistic piece. What do you think the combination is there?
Yeah, I think like we were talking about earlier, they're all interwoven. The physical and the emotional and the psychological is all interwoven. So I think there's the physiological impacts of the coffee itself. But there's also, like you're describing, if you can take a moment and have some time to reflect and feel good, having your cup of coffee, that's going to have a nice effect on you. Also, I wonder how much, if I get up in the morning and have a cup of coffee, I'm not getting up to have a cup of coffee to then lay on the couch and watch TV all day.
Just the activity itself, you think?
A cup of coffee to start my day.
Of course. I didn't even put that together.
Yeah, and I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud with you right now, but I suspect that has part
something
of it,
to do with it. Yeah,
that's one thread of this.
Especially because it seems that the caffeinated coffee is really where the benefits lie for the mood. The decaf doesn't have all the health benefits of coffee. It doesn't have many benefits of caffeinated coffee, and I believe this is one of them.
Yeah, and especially that first cup of coffee really has an impact in terms of wakefulness, in terms of getting you up and kind of going.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But there's two specific studies that I recommend the listeners check out. The one that was really interesting to me was a meta-analysis of a bunch of different studies, and you can find this easily by Googling coffee and depression research. But it's basically 330,677 participants, and there was a pretty dose-dependent and drastic reduction where their risk of depression decreased by 8%. And I thought that was really fascinating because of the size of the study. And then another one that was really wild about a 50% reduction in suicide after accessing data of 43,600 men and 91,000 women from the late 80s / early 90s to around 2008. And it showed a reduction in suicide risk of 50%, which I thought was, very, very interesting.
That's huge.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously that one study it doesn't really prove anything on its own, but clearly there's something going on here, and I look forward to digging into this research more with our resident coffee expert, Dr. Coffee. So yeah, what do you think about that, man? You going to have yourself an extra cup?
Yeah, I'm on my second right now.
Nice. So. Yeah, man, I look forward to exploring this more. Holy cow, we're already going long. Joel, this was a pleasure, man. I really enjoy talking to you. I hope we can get together more. Why don't we just throw out your URL, anywhere people can find you, one more time for everyone who's interested?
Yeah, it's drjoelwade.com, drjoelwade.com.
And also the Mastering Happiness podcast. Find it everywhere. That's a wonderful show you've put together, man. Thank you for doing this today, Joel. Thank you for everything you do. I know you're flying around the world, working with companies, working with kids, saving the world, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jordan. It's always a pleasure.
I feel the same way. Everyone listening, make sure to share the show. We appreciate you. Share this episode. This is Dr. Joel Wade and Jordan River signing off, wishing you an extraordinary day. We'll see you next time on the Coffee, Health, and Science Podcast.